anyone else is going to show up today or maybe a little bit later, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how I rearranged things because of last week's storm and school being closed. So if you can get to the calendar, you can get it from, oh, that's first period. It looks the same as yours, but it's first period. If you can get to Blackboard, you can get to the class calendar here, or maybe you have it on your bookmarks. But I wanted to talk about how I rearrange things. I had to take some things out, obviously. My choices were take things out or make you do double. And I just don't think that during this situation, adding is the appropriate way to go. So I ended up removing a couple of things and shifting some deadlines so that we had a little breathing room to finish up the stuff that we were supposed to do last week. It changes a few things for the schedule. It changes a few things for the midterm. So I wanted to go through that with you just so that you're aware of those changes. Obviously, you probably already know that they've extended the grade deadline at East through Thursday. That's good because if you haven't had a chance to finish up discussion number 3, I think most people had posted on the 12th because that was prior to the storm. But what I think didn't happen is a lot of people didn't have an opportunity to do the responses, the classmate replies but I put it on for yesterday, but I'm gonna extend that through the week. So if sometime this week you can get those done, if you get them done before, like tomorrow afternoon, then I will include it in your 6 weeks grade. If you don't, then, or you can't or whatever, then I will give you an incomplete for the 4th 6 weeks, and then you have until the end of the weekend. But let's try to wrap up discussion number 3 by the end of the weekend if we can, because I took off the discussion that we were supposed to have, discussion number 4, and I moved it to the following week, and we've kind of moved everything down a little bit. So there's no discussion this week. So if we wrap up discussion 3 by the end of the weekend, then we'll be in good shape to just start next week and have discussion number 4. We won't have anything lingering. But I have to be flexible. I want to be sensitive to the fact that there's still some people with Wi-Fi trouble. People were emailing me last night that they were having trouble with a consistent signal. So so through the weekend, and then we'll sort out the grades as you finish those. There's only 3 grades in the East grade book for the 4th 6 weeks, and they're all the first 3 discussions, just because that's how this course goes. So I wanted to make sure I get those grades in. And if you have all 3 of them, then I'll go ahead and post your grade. But if something's up with number 3, when I look and you have your posts but not your responses, then I'll just hold off, give you an incomplete, and we can finish it up in the next week. The only thing about incompletes is that if you're an athlete in season, it affects, or other organizations, it affects your eligibility. So so you want to finish that up within a week, and then I'll just grade everything else that comes in through the weekend so everybody will know their grades, and then I'll just post the grades. I'll clear the incompletes next week. Any questions about that? If you can do it, get it done. If you can't, try to finish it by the end of the week so it doesn't linger. Okay, so then there are some other changes. Originally, we had Gulliver's Travels up here before the midterm, but I moved that to after spring break. So the midterm will not include, obviously, will not include Gulliver's Travels. I'm not going to test you on something that we haven't looked at. So I'm going to change the midterm to only cover through Paradise Lost, which will be starting next week. We're not even reading all of Paradise Lost. It's a good sized book. We're just reading the first 2 chapters. They call them books, but they're like chapters. So next week we'll be starting the next unit and moving into the Restoration and the 18th century. And we'll have our discussion 4, and hopefully we'll be back on track at that point. I'll talk a little bit more about the midterm on Friday. But there is a window here in which you have from the 10th to the 13th to take your midterm exam. And I'll talk about that later. Another thing that I did to the calendar is I did have to take out one of the pieces that we're going to do at the end of the semester. I took out Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad. I'm not too upset about that, to be honest with you, because it's super depressing and I don't think we need any more depressing stuff. So I took that out and I moved everything down. Like, that's what gave me the room to move everything down. But when I did that, I needed to remove 2 discussions. Now, don't start crying. But we're only going to have 10 discussions instead of 12 this term. I'm sorry. It's just the way it worked out because of last week. I had to take out Heart of Darkness and there were 2 discussion questions linked to that piece. So I took them out and we will have a grand total of 10 discussions for the term. So if you have issues with that or problems, you can let me know, but I think most people are probably not too upset about that. And also give us another week to have a break. Originally in April, there's a discussion every week and that gets hefty. So I was able to give a little break right here in April, and that way, you know, it's not too congested with discussions. Another thing that I moved around is the first essay. I started talking about essay number 1 last week. It's on Othello. And when I moved our conclusion of Othello to this week, obviously, I don't think it's fair to make that due on the 28th because you have to have finished reading the play to do the paper, and it just didn't seem like there was enough turnaround there to get the paper done. So I moved the paper deadline for essay number 1 to the 21st of March. I thought about putting it on the 7th, like 1 week later, but I'd rather you work on studying for the midterm that week. Not super happy about putting it in right after spring break because it implies that you're supposed to be working on your paper during spring break. You do not have to work on your paper during spring break. You can. But if you wanted to work on it over the next couple of weeks and get it mostly done, then you wouldn't really have much to do over spring break, or you could turn it in early if you wanted to. So I moved it here. I just felt like it was the best spot. I didn't want to do it immediately after the midterm exam, and I didn't want to do it just before the midterm exam. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I just try to think about what the load is at any point in time, and I try to offset that. So that's pretty much it. That's all the changes that I made to the schedule. Are there any questions about that? Do you feel like I did an okay job making those decisions? Everybody okay with it? Okay. All right, I'm just trying to explain why I did what I did. I mean, nothing you can do about taking a week out except take some other stuff out. So I will tell you, just as a side note, and I'll probably tell you again next week, I'm likely leaving town for spring break. There's some stuff going on with my family back in Michigan, and I haven't seen them since Christmas 2019. And there's some things going on with my family. So I'm going to go over spring break and probably also the week after that. But I'm still planning on teaching that week. I'll just be teaching from Michigan. But just a heads up, in case there's an issue or something like that, I'm planning to be up there for, you know, a couple weeks to be with my family and help them a little bit. So that's coming up, but I'm still gonna, they're trying to figure out if I can have permission to teach from home or whether I'm gonna have to call in sick. But even if I call in sick, I'll still have my classes. So. All right, let us talk about this week. So going back to, this is the last week of February. Next week is March already. Can you believe that? That's crazy. That's what happens when you have a week of staring into space during power outages. So this week we're going to be wrapping up Othello, and we'll talk about Acts 3 and 4 today, and we'll have Act 5 for Thursday. I'm also planning on playing the film version on Thursday. We've seen already through Act 2, so I'll play Acts 3, 4, and 5 for you on Thursday. and we'll talk about Act 5. We do have class this Friday. It's a B week. And on that day, we'll talk a little bit more about essay number 1. Probably you've just been thinking about it up till now, or maybe you haven't been thinking about it, I don't know. But you're gonna have to choose a topic. And after you finish reading Othello this week, it's a good time to start thinking about which of those topics. There are like 8 or 10 different topics that you can choose from. So we'll talk a little more about the essay. I did talk about it the last week that we had of school on that Thursday, but we'll go into it a little bit more now that the play's finished. And I'm also going to talk about the midterm and give you some details about what that is like and release the study guide to you. I have a couple more things to do on the study guide, but it'll be available to you on Friday so that you can start preparing. That's 2 weeks before the midterm actually happens. So you can see the midterm, you can take it anytime from March 10th through March 13th, anytime in there. And then, so that gives you enough time to study and prepare, go over things, etc. So I'll make that study guide available to you. We'll talk about the composition of the exam. It is not a multiple choice exam. It's entirely written. So I want to talk about how that plays out, how the points stack up on that test, and how you take it. It's not timed, but you have to finish it in one sitting and stuff like that. So I'll go over all of that this Friday. So Friday be a good time to make sure that you're here so that we can go over that. But let us take some time today to focus on Othello Acts 3 and 4. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the study guide. I'm going to talk about those 2 acts a little bit. And while I'm doing that, maybe you want to just kind of like zoom through here and see if there are any. There's a lot on this one because I had to double up and have you read 2 acts, but you know, they're interesting acts. And then I'll answer any of these questions that you might have that you want me to spend some time going over, just so that you can fortify your notes or anything like that. But Acts 3 and 4 are really the spot where we see Iago ramping up his campaign to ruin Othello. And he is so focused on that he doesn't mind ruining some other people in the meantime. Cassio, well, he doesn't like him either because he took his position that he thought he should have. But also Desdemona. Desdemona is just collateral damage. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't harm Iago in any way, but she's gonna go down because she's the instrument that Iago uses in order to corrupt and ruin Othello. And we really see that in Acts 3 and 4. We've seen that a little bit in the first 2 acts, but 3 and 4 is where his plan really starts to come together. Iago is using everything that he can to try to convince Othello that Desdemona has been unfaithful to him and is having an affair with Michael Cassio. And there are a few things that are instrumental in that deception. One is that Cassio and Desdemona have kind of a nice friendly relationship, and they whisper things to each other sometimes. And when Desdemona is like waiting for Othello to arrive on Cyprus and she's nervous about if he's going to make it because he's on a different ship, she holds Michael Cassio's hand. So they have a purely innocent but fairly close relationship. And Iago will mutate this and use it to convince Othello that she is unfaithful. Oh, look at how close they're sitting. Oh, why did Michael Cassio walk away as soon as he saw you when he was talking to your wife? And so he starts planting these little seeds of doubt. And those little seeds come together to form a huge field of jealousy in Othello. And there are other things too that contribute to that deception. Another one is the handkerchief that Desdemona misplaces. Desdemona has this very distinctive handkerchief. Handkerchiefs aren't things that we really have nowadays because, I don't know, in the 21st century, we're all about disposable things. We just use Kleenex, um, but they had handkerchiefs that they would keep and, you know, blow their nose or wipe their eyes or whatever, and then they would wash them and so on. I'm sure you know the concept. And she has one that Othello gave her when they were first dating. It was the first, well, they weren't really dating, but you know, nowadays talking, they were conversing, and I don't know. My time we would have said dating, then it was sort of like, yeah, I guess it's just talking now, is what people say. And it's a handkerchief that has strawberries embroidered on it. And it was a handkerchief that was given to his mother by some mysterious Egyptian like person. And his mother had this handkerchief her whole life, and it's supposed to have magical properties that will keep her husband with her, you know, her whole life. And she gave it to Othello, and Othello gave it to Desdemona. But that handkerchief plays a pivotal role in Iago's campaign to convince Othello that Desdemona is cheating. And she drops it. Emilia picks it up and brings it to him. And then he uses it to, well, in Act 4, we find out that he uses it in order to convince Othello that Desdemona has given that sacred handkerchief to Cassio. And then Cassio has given it to his prostitute slash obsessive girlfriend type person. And so the handkerchief that was so important to Othello, and it was his mother's, also kind of gets corrupted by Iago manipulating it, the happenstance that he comes across it, and turning it into something evil and ugly, and contributing to the relationship between Desdemona and Cassio, which is an imaginary love affair. It's not real. So another element that contributes to Iago's ability to convince Othello that his wife is cheating on him is Bianca. Bianca is the woman that is in love with Cassio. He doesn't seem to care about her a whole lot, but she's instrumental in a couple of ways. Number one, Cassio finds the handkerchief in his room. Emilia puts it there. And, you know, she doesn't understand what she's doing, but it's a bait so that Cassio can, you know, like whip it out one day, and Othello will be like, "Where did you get that?" You know, like, "That's my wife's handkerchief. How dare you?" You know. But instead he gives it to Bianca and asks her to make a copy of it. He likes it for some reason, and he asks her to embroider another version of it. And so when Bianca has the handkerchief, Iago gets to say, "Oh, well, look, he doesn't care about, you know, anything. He just takes your wife's handkerchief that's so important to you and just gives it to a, you know, prostitute." So those are the things that contribute, I think, the most to Iago being able to convince Othello that he's being cheated on. I'm looking in the chat to see if there are any questions, because that's the main focus of Acts 3 and 4. I mean, there are some other things that happen. Lodovico comes to Cyprus and check up on things and see how things are going, and there's some interaction with him. Are there any, let's just start with Act 3. Are there any questions that you want me, you can just put the number, that you want me to spend a little time talking about in specific so that you can improve your notes? About Act 4 or anything there? Look them over. If you could answer the question yourself, then you're probably good. But if you're thinking to yourself, I don't remember that quotation or why it's important, then, you know, just jot the number there in the chat and I'll spend some time talking about it. I will tell you that some of these quotations are on the midterm. The way the midterm works is there are short answers and essay questions. Short answers are, like 4 or 5 sentences, and the essays are like 10 plus sentences. The way that they've structured, I wouldn't call that an essay, but I just call it a response, but they call it an essay. And there are different terms, characters, quotations that are significant to the works that we've read up to the point of the midterm. And so some of these quotations, I already know which ones. There's a big bank of like 150 terms, characters, historical people, etc. And you're going to get like 15 of them. So whichever random 15 you get will be the ones that you have to respond to and explain. So some of those are quotations from different pieces that we've read. And I've given you more than the ones that are in the bank for the test, but any of these that are here, I got them from the midterm. So if there are any quotations that you're not sure, you'll need to know who said it, the context, what was going on, and why it's important, why that idea is important to the play. I'm not going to pick something minor, but it'll be something that's significant to the play, but you're going to have to be able to figure out from the context of the quotation, why it's important and who said it and all that. Do you need to know all these? No, because like I said, it's going to be random, but if there's any quotations that you want me to talk about, that's why I want to go through them with you on the study guide. I don't see anything there in the chat, so you can continue to add things or start adding things if you want. I do want to also mention these key concepts. They're always the same at the end of each study guide, and that's because another feature of the midterm is making sure that you know how to create a theme. And so some of the questions a question that you might get on the midterm might ask you to explain the concept of jealousy and how it is developed in the play and what lesson we learn about jealousy. What's the theme surrounding jealousy in the play? So if there are any of these concepts that you want me to talk about in terms of how that progresses through the play, I'd be glad to also respond to that, because you could get a question on the midterm that's like, explain how the concept of loyalty is presented in Othello and a significant theme that comes from that topic. So that's why I've been putting them on here, so that you can continue to think about, okay, this is a new act of the play. How has the concept of loyalty or reputation grown or developed in this next part of the play? So that's how that works. I don't see anything in the chat. Maybe y'all got caught up to speed over the winter, I don't want to say it's a winter break, but the winter weather. It's funny how many things require electricity, huh? Okay, well, usually there are a number of questions that you want me to go over, but I don't see any there. So I will just say that Act 5, looking forward to the next act, that you should read for Friday is the culmination of the play. And if you read all the way to the end of Act 4 already, then you know pretty much what's going to happen. Act 4 is a complete setup for Act 5. There's even a question about that on here, I think. In what ways is the stage set for the tragedy at the end of Act 4? In other words, what happens at the end of Act 4 that sets up the tragedy that's going to happen at the end? Most of the characters are going to die. That's just the nature of a tragedy. So prepare yourself for bodies. And we can already tell that Othello is thoroughly convinced at the end of Act 4 that Desdemona has been unfaithful to him. He's traumatized by it, and sort of so much so that he even goes into a like epileptic trance, and he has completely been convinced through Iago's underhanded actions. And don't you think it's interesting how Iago is able to completely convert Othello to believing that his wife has been unfaithful, but Othello still believes that Iago is a great guy? He does that in such a manipulative way, right? By saying, "Oh, I shouldn't talk about that. Oh, come on. No, I don't think it's a good idea." Like that whole like trope. So yeah, Act 5 is going to be the culmination of Othello's rage against Desdemona, and also some of the other open storylines that we've seen up until the end of Act 4, like with Rodrigo. In Act 4, Iago gets Rodrigo to try to kill Cassio, because Othello wants Cassio dead and charges Iago with that task, but Iago doesn't want to do it. So he tries to get Rodrigo to do it. Yeah, it's pretty complex. All right, well, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm assuming that you're all okay with these questions here, that you kind of look them over and feel comfortable that you could answer them. There is a study guide also for Act 5, so I would recommend that you look that over before class on Thursday. Read Act 5, look over the study guide, and then that way, if there are any items on that list that you want me to spend some time talking about, then you can go ahead and let me know and I will do that. Otherwise, that's it. Oh, also on Thursday, we'll watch the film. I think I already said that. But we'll watch the ending of the play and the film from like Act 3 through Act 5. And then on Friday, we have discussion about the essay that's coming up and also the midterm. So we'll talk about those on Friday. All right, I don't see anything in the chat, so hopefully everybody's up to speed. If something comes up, it's good to communicate. Make sure that you drop me a line if you're having a problem. It's just always good to be up to speed with where everybody is, and everything's kind of coming back right now, but I know there's some residual problems. So if something comes up, just let me know, and we'll work it out. All right. I guess that's it for today then. So I'm going to say goodbye. It's a little short class today. Maybe it'll be a little bit longer on Thursday because we'll be watching the film version of the play. So we'll make up for it that way. All right. If there are any more questions, then I will see you on Thursday. Bye.